Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you can hear me well. We're in a very noisy Cape Town office tonight, and I'm sure there's going to be a very noisy Johannesburg office tonight too. But let me start by congratulating all of you to be present at an extremely rare event, a rare double duo, a double act, where we are celebrating an incredible exhibition tonight, and at the same time, something that happens only too rarely in South Africa, the launch of a definitive catalogue raisonné of important artists in South Africa. It is surprising to find that so few of our major artists have actually benefited from such an endeavor. It is, in particular, I would like to welcome and thank some very special people tonight. Let me start with the family, the son and daughter of Mr. Kumalo, Thandi and Brian. Very much welcome at Strauss and Company. I'm sure that tonight will bring back a lot of good memories to you. Then, of course, a very special welcome must go to the authors of this amazing endeavor, Gavin Watkins and Charles Skinner. And also, I would call at the same time to Kevin Shenton and Danelle van Jaarsberg, who are the book designers. I think collectively they've created a product that they themselves, that we at Strauss and Company and everyone in South Africa can be very proud of and very, very thankful for. I would like to welcome specifically the Gunther family. I'm sure that tonight will be a very special evening for them and bring back a lot of fond memories of the dynamic trio that Egon, Sydney and Ezrom must have been at the time. I can only imagine the energy, the debate, the conversation between those, and it's lovely to see it embodied in the beautiful works that's on display tonight. I would like to welcome our very generous lenders who made their works available for inclusion in the catalogue raisonné, as well as the exhibition that you are privileged to see tonight. That includes major public institutions in South Africa, Iziku, the Pretoria Art Museum, Wits Art Museum, Norval Foundation, the Reserve Bank, Standard Bank, and 21 private lenders who were all generous enough to entrust us with their treasures. We deeply appreciate that. We would like to welcome everyone that collaborated in their own unique and special way to give the catalogue raisonné and this exhibition the depth and veracity that it deserves, including people like Neil Dundas and the team at Goodman, Sean O'Toole, Karel Nel, Wilhelm van Rensburg, Alistair Arisha, and the rest of the very dynamic team at Strauss and Company, led by the effervescent Susie Goodman in Johannesburg. At Strauss and Company, we believe that you can judge a country by the way it treats, it respects and interacts with its artists. And through the combined activities that we are celebrating tonight, we have shone a light on the life and works of two of our country's finest sculptors. And it is a deserving and long overdue moment. Even from where I am, and you can hear the noise in the background, where the ever-innovating Strauss team is launching a international NFT based on some of the finest wines that's ever come on auction in recent decades in the world of some of the major wine producers in France, Australia, and America. A very exciting endeavor. It's, I'm happy to say that I wish I could be at two places at one time, but it will make it up by sampling some of the wares that is available tonight, which I'm sure will be very rewarding to our guests here. Even from where I am, and I had the benefit of Susie and Alistair and Wilhelm running me through the exhibition on a video call earlier tonight, one can sense the energy and ambience of the artworks on display, tapping into the myths and roots of African culture. A truly special moment. At Strauss, we believe that art transcends boundaries, decades, fashion, and trends. And we trust that the rich bounty around us and you tonight will undoubtedly lead to us developing a deeper understanding and appreciation of our unique blend of cultures in this country, building bridges and motivating us to dream and believe in our collective creative potential. Please immerse yourself in the collection at your disposal tonight, the biggest collective exhibition of its kind, including these two artists, with 60 of the 125 documented works by Sydney Kumalo being on show tonight, and 32 of the 55 works by Legae. That is truly a unique moment. I would ask you to please stop by the Zulu King by Kumalo, which we believe has never been exhibited in public before. Another special moment. So please cherish this moment and let us believe and believe happily that you've made art history tonight in a very wholesome and uplifting manner. And my very best wishes to the authors and his team at Strauss for the success of the catalogue and the exhibition. And my sincere wish that it would leave make a lasting contribution and inspire more of its kind. Thank you very much.
Production of this extraordinary work, but I hope that I can have something to do with it going forward and getting it into people's hands. So thank you very much. It feels like an enormous privilege to be here. I'm now going to read from my notes. It has been an honor and a privilege to collaborate with Strauss on the launch of this truly remarkable book, The Sculptures of Sydney Kumalo and Ezrom Legae. I so admire the passion and generosity with which Strauss approach the work that they do. They are never simply an auction house buying and selling works. They are devoted to promoting an understanding of art, to the sharing of knowledge, to educating the public about art and its importance in our world. Their approach couldn't be more appreciated in a country like ours, where the arts is so severely underfunded. And this book is a physical illustration of their generosity and their desire to share knowledge. They have published it on a non-for-profit basis. Susie, you and your team are a complete inspiration. Thank you for everything that you do. I've worked in various sectors of the book industry in most of my life, and what most of you might not know is how many people are involved in the production of a book and how many stages a book goes through, from the inception of the idea to the final work that you hold in your hand, that you put on your bookshelf, that you allow into your head and into your thoughts. With a book of this magnitude, you can multiply that countless times. So when Wilhelm came to see me and opened the cardboard box to reveal this work to me, what I saw with absolute wonder was years and years and years of passion, dedication, knowledge, research, sourcing, archiving, writing, collating, structuring, restructuring, editing and re-editing, designing, and then of course checking, and checking again. The mechanics and the logistics of book creation are complicated, and it requires great skill and great passion and devotion to produce a book as beautiful and as flawless as this one is. So I'd like to congratulate Gavin Watkins and Charles Skinner on this truly remarkable achievement. This book is monumental in every way. More so than anything, it is monumental in what it brings to the world. When I first walked into this exhibition, and I had the privilege of doing this yesterday with Wilhelm, it was just he and I experienced something I've actually never experienced with art before. I felt completely overwhelmed and really moved by what I saw. The beauty of the work, the eye-watering skill of these artists, the scale of this exhibition, and how brilliantly Wilhelm has curated it. And I think that more than anything, what it took for two black men working at the height of apartheid to produce this remarkable body of work, now collated into this beautiful book. Gavin and Charles have spent 25 years researching, compiling, and writing the catalogue raisonné. And by the way, I didn't know what a catalogue raisonné was. And if any of you don't, it's fine. They're going to explain it to you. They have had extensive input from the Kumalo and Legae families, from the artists, Johannesburg gallerists Egon Gunther and Linda Goodman, and also from the Grosvenor Gallery in London. The artists' teachers and mentors, Cecil Stockness and Eduardo Villa, also made significant contributions. Just a little bit about Gavin and Charles, and I was surprised to read, as I'm sure you're going to be to hear, that they both have backgrounds in more scientific pursuits. Gavin has a PhD in mathematics. He was professor of maths at UNISA, Stellenbosch and UWC. He also founded an actuarial consulting business in Cape Town. He's always collected though, and while he started with Cape Furniture, he now focuses on South African art and sculpture and Australian art and ceramics. He lives in Sydney, where he owns the Red Fern Art Gallery, specializing in mid-century design, art and ceramics. Charles is a geologist who spent 33 years with De Beers exploring for kimberlites. He also headed a worldwide search for new diamond mines. Charles collects mostly South African art, so clearly there is art in science too, which we all knew. Congratulations, Charles and Gavin, on this remarkable achievement. I'm going to hand over to Wilhelm van Rensburg now, who is, along with Arisha Maharaj, is the curator of this wonderful exhibition.
A special word of welcome to both of you. You've heard the word catalogue raisonné often. So Gavin, tell us, for those of us who don't know, what is a catalogue raisonné?
This goes back a long way. So, in simple terms, a catalogue raisonné is a complete or comprehensive record of an artist's entire output during their lifetime, and then if you're a sculptor, posthumously as well, because casts can be made after you're dead. So it's cataloguing, recording every single work produced by that artist during their working life as an artist, and then, in the case of sculptors, posthumously. And I think Wilhelm mentioned earlier on that to date in South Africa, there's only been one catalogue raisonné, and that's, sorry, it's me with this thing, is it? And that's the catalogue raisonné written in 1994 by Darlene Marais on Maggie Loebschen. So if you think there are artists like Irma Stern, Peony, Preller, there are lots of books with lots of photographs of their works, but they're not comprehensive catalogue raisonnés. And even if you go overseas, I took the book to show the top book producer in Australia, and he said to me, there isn't a single book which is a catalogue raisonné on sculptures in Australia, and there's actually not really a proper catalogue raisonné of artists in Australia. So the problem with it, and you'll understand that as we go through this talk a little bit, is if you're trying to catalogue paintings, then your biggest challenge is, well, finding them, but they're either on canvas or board or paper. But there's only one of each one you find. You've only got to find one. What we attempted to do with this book was not only identify every single sculpture made, recorded to have been made by Sydney Kumalo and Ezrom Legae, we attempted to do a census. So typically with sculptures, you produce them initially maybe as a terracotta or plaster of Paris, which is unique, but then you cast them in bronze. And typically a bronze is cast in an edition of 5 or 7 or 10, seldom more than 10. And they hopefully, in most cases, if they're professionally done, they're numbered and signed. What we attempted to do was to locate every single cast that had been produced for each of these sculptures. So if you've got an edition of 10 and you've got 10 of them that were cast, we've attempted to identify in the catalogue raisonné the location of each of these numbered casts that the artist might have produced. The other thing you'll find in the catalogue raisonné is not only comprehensive information on exhibitions they might have been on, newspaper articles at the time, books, magazines, but also when we were going through this, find which collections they were in, so either public, corporate, or private, and compiling all that information, and then finally recording all the auction results of sales of these works since inception. So as you go through the catalogue raisonné, you'll find that there's an enormous amount of detail in each of the numbered works. So as was just mentioned earlier, Sydney Kumalo's total output in his lifetime was 125 sculptures. Not all of them unique, because some of them were remodeled and changed, so there's some variations on some of the sculptures, but essentially 125 different sculptures. To put that in context, we've got, of the 87 sculptures that were done under Egon Günther's tutelage, we have 48 of those on the exhibition. And of the 38 done under Little Goodman, we have 12 of those on the exhibition. So it's a significant percentage. For Ezrom Legae, Ezrom only produced 55 unique works. Of those, of the 30 that Egon Gunther did, we've got 19 on the exhibition. And of the 25 that Linda did, we've got 14 on the exhibition. So not only is the catalogue raisonné a complete record, but this exhibition is outstanding in terms of the coverage of the works that they did during their lifetime.
One of the things I'm sure everybody wants to know is how did the two of you get interested in the works of Kumalo and Legae specifically? Charles, we'll start with you. Okay.
So as Susie mentioned, I collected 18th century Cape furniture and was a major collector of 18th century Cape furniture. In 1998, Stefan Bell sold my collection in Cape Town. And through that, I got to meet Vanessa Phillips. And around about 1998, I essentially bought my first sculpture, even though I'd been buying art for 25 years. I'd never really taken much notice of sculpture, and I bought a Lucas Toley carving a couple of years before. And then I was in Joburg on business, and at a small auction house, I bought the sculpture. They didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was. I went to Stefan Belts, and he said, I'm not sure, but there's somebody you can ask in Johannesburg. His name is Egon Gunther. You need to go and ask him what he thinks. So he gave me the telephone number. I phoned Egon. I made an appointment for 10 the next morning. I arrived because of Joburg traffic at 10:10, and he tapped his watch and he said to me, when you have an appointment for 10, you don't come at 5 to 10, and you definitely don't come at 10:10. So that was the start. And from there, I got interested, and he had worked with Sydney Kumalo and Ezrom Legae up to 1972. He's German. He has these amazing records of everything, his file notes, his invoice books, his photographs, his exhibition catalogues, all of that he still had. And he started sharing it with me, but in the beginning, only by him reading them out to me and me recording the conversation. He wouldn't give them to me. And then about a year and a half after that, and I'd been doing research on Kumalo and Legae and what had come on the market and who had them and so on. We were sitting down over a lunch one day drinking some wine, and he said, I've got a deal for you. I'll give you all my records, provided you write a proper book on Kumalo and Legae. So that was the start. And then it was a long journey from 98 through till sort of 2018, coming back. So I lived in the UK, London, for 7.5 years and got to know Grosvenor Gallery. I'd come back to South Africa and deal with Linda Goodman and go through her records. Every time I came back, I spent lots of time with Egon. I met Fernand Hengi, who at that point had gone back to Switzerland. He lived in Basel. But around 2018-19, I must say I was starting to run out of energy. And it's quite a lonely thing when you've got nobody else to really talk to who knows as much as you do. So you can't give them something to edit because they don't know what you've written. And then fortuitously, I curated another sculpture exhibition here at Strauss, almost forgotten sculptor by the name of Peter Hayden, who was another one of Ezrom Gunther's sculptors. And I only discovered this 2 or 3 days ago. Very sneakily, Charles wanted to meet me. So he came along intentionally to the Peter Hayden exhibition, not to look at Peter Hayden, but to introduce himself to me. And so from August 2019 until now, Charles has been my left-hand and right-hand man on the ground in South Africa, doing an enormous amount of research in newspaper archives and organizing fabulous photographs that you see in the book. So he's probably not going to want to talk, but I'm handing over to him at this point.
Well, I started collecting art probably I spent most of my working life outside of South Africa, generally in Central African countries and Brazil and other places. But I had this fascination for art. I'm not sure where it came from, but I couldn't find anything that was written. So if you went back to the sort of period of the late 90s, early 2000s, there were very few books on South African artists and very few books, comprehensive books, on South African black artists from the period. And as I sort of started spending more time on the African continent, I tried to research more and more about the African artists. Nothing was written, and the material that was written was by and large repetitive. It was anecdotal. It just carried on and on. And often you could trace it back to a particular academic who was seen as the fountain of truth in the time. And not to be critical of that work, but I thought there's got to be a lot more to this. So in that period, I think I bought my first Kumalo at the Grosvenor Gallery in London, because I'd sort of, this is really internet emails and that sort of level of communication that you have with the world. So I bought this one Sydney Kumalo, large-seated woman, one of his most spectacular and one of my favorite works. And then, I came across the Grosvenor Gallery through all of this research, and consequently I started collecting a lot of newspaper articles, press articles. In about 2014, I found a Reuters clip in which they filmed the very first Kumalo exhibition that was done by Egon Guntis on the 8th of May.
Can I hold that so we can show the film?
Okay.
Yeah. Oops. It's just right. So this is really important. It's 1962, think of the period, and we had Tabu and Becky at this exhibition, Joe Slover next to Sydney. And there's no sound, you haven't got it there.
So the gentleman, this is Sydney Kumalo, the gentleman with him is a man called Houghton, who was very impressive, very well-known professor of music. He had qualified from the London Academy of Music. It's past there. Anyway. So I found this clip on just surfing through the internet and finding these things. And it's a long story, but I managed to sort of download a clip of it, which wasn't easy. And then subsequently I found another video clip by Reuters of an exhibition in which Kumalo's works were shown at the Camden in London in September 1969. And I had this and a lot of other newspaper clippings and what have you. And because I'm not sort of a very, I suppose, engaging person socially, it's not sort of, and I was spending most of my life living in sort of countries where there was a little connectivity with the sort of art world. So I wanted to introduce myself to Gavin because I'd heard that there was this catalogue raisonné coming out. So I introduced him, as he said, at the peak. I delayed my trip to Angola, and I came to the Peter Hayden exhibition with the sole purpose of saying, Gavin, I have, 20 odd Sydney Kumalo and Ezrom Legae sculptures, and it would be great if you could put them in a catalogue raisonné, because a catalogue raisonné has to be, for an artist to be acknowledged in a catalogue, have a catalogue raisonné written. Very few artists have that done, let alone in South Africa, as Gavin has mentioned. So, I got Gavin's email address. The meeting was as short as that. And then I emailed him with the images of the works in my collection. And then Gavin shared parts of the manuscript with me, and I said, oh, but you must have seen this Reuters clip, you must have seen this Camden clip. And I sent them to him, and he was like, I've never seen any of this. And then I started sharing newspaper articles that I'd sort of compiled over the years, and then suddenly, there was this common thread of, wow, the story's a lot richer. Let's go and research more. Let's avoid let's make it primary research. Let's go and look for the source of this information, the journalists that reported on exhibitions in the 1950s and the 1960s. And of course, COVID struck. But, as Gavin mentioned, I had direct access to all of these different institutions. And we started to build up a story that was at some point beyond my comprehension because it was so rich. And I'd always believed that if one had to find material about South African black artists from the 50s and the 60s and the 70s when you're in the height of apartheid, you had to go back to newspapers because if it was going to be anywhere, it would have been written in little classifieds saying this gallery is hosting this exhibition and so on and so forth. And so we built this huge, relatively speaking, I mean, we've got tens of files of newspaper articles. And you'll see if you read the book that we didn't use a typical sort of, neither of us are art historians or qualified as, in that field, but we have a very strong forensic sort of approach to understanding information. So when you read through the catalogue, you'll see there's a lot of the quotes from the press of the day are right there. There's no little number saying, look at this footnote or go and look at the back, because we felt it's so important that the reader can engage immediately what a particular newspaper, whether it was the Hoofstad or the Oggendblad or the Star or the Rand Daily Mail, was saying about these particular artists.
So certainly a lot of remarkable. It sounds like a lot of remarkable discoveries you made, especially that 1962 film clip. But difficulties, I'm sure you stumbled across some difficulties.
I think with anything like this, when you're going back so far, I mean, the first works by Sydney Kumalo in 1958, and then Sydney dies unfortunately young at the age of 53. Legae lives till the age of 61. Had it not been for Egon Gunther's records, you couldn't do this. That such a significant body of the work was the period from, in the case of Sydney Kumalo, the early 60s through to 72 with Sydney, and with Legae from 65 to 72. And Egon just kept meticulous records, and he had them in all different ways, shapes, and forms. So I'd go and visit him, and every time I came out, we'd discover some new file or some new box or some new record that recorded an exhibition or something that he had done. So I think those were some of the difficulties. There's a contentious period in the book you'll read about where Egon saw this really fabulous opportunity when Eric Estrick, who was a major London art dealer, American, but art dealer in London, very upmarket gallery, showed interest in South African artists for exhibitions in London. And Egon saw this as a real opportunity to put Sydney Kumalo, this was pre his involvement with Ezrom to a large degree. So it was very much focused on Sydney. It was an opportunity to really put Sydney on the world stage. And I'm not going to spoil the fun of reading the book because you actually have to look further than just the pictures, you have to read it. There's a very contentious period with Grosvenor Gallery. And so some of the difficulties were things like working out, were all the works correct? Were they all, were they all properly cast? Were they all numbered? Were there potentially copies around that might have been made during this period? So there were difficulties in working through what was authentic and what wasn't. And then I spent a couple of days once at Linda Goodman's going through all her files and luckily recorded all the information I could get hold of at Linda's. And then I went to Switzerland and was able to get hold of files from Gallery 101, Gallery 21. So the difficulties were, and Charles already mentioned all the newspaper articles and magazines. Just to give you a sense, accounts today, we've got 950 references in the book that we looked at. So a lot of this was really going back to source and saying, is this correct? Or is this just an anecdotal urban legend thing that somebody's written? Is it actually correct? What's it based on? Where did they get this information from? Just identifying all the works and getting titles put to them was difficult. So often you will have a description with a title, but no photograph of the work. And auction houses, unfortunately, I won't mention Strauss, but other auction houses often will just make up a title. It looks like a seated woman. Let's call it seated figure or seated woman for the umpteenth time. So the titles didn't necessarily match the titles that had been agreed when the sculptures were made. I think some of the The other challenges were sort of working through the fact that on auction, a lot of works have been sold that are not necessarily correct. And how do you deal with that in the catalogue raisonné? And we made a decision very early on, that we would only include in the catalogue raisonné works that we felt were properly catalogued and recorded, that we could vouch for based on certainty of Eglon's records, Linda's records, Grosvenor Gallery's records, etc., articles, press articles, photographs from exhibition catalogues, and so on. And so that there will be some works that people might own that have been sold on auction in this country and elsewhere as Kumalo and Legae, and they may find they're not in the catalogue raisonné. Do you want to?
I would add that, just to not necessarily difficulties, but there are two major unresolved issues that gave us a lot of headache, and we thought quite ambitiously that we'd get to the bottom of it. And it's two particular works that Sydney Kumalo produced very early on in his career. In 1960, the first one that landed him on the to the knowledge of the public was in the year 1960. He exhibited at 6 exhibitions in Johannesburg, and the seminal work was a work called Praying Woman. There's this the maquette of Praying Woman, SK8, as you'll see it's mounted on a floating shelf on the wall, the rest are all on plinths, so it stands out. And from that, Egon cast a large figure which was sold. It was exhibited at the Rand Show in April 1960 and sold at the same time to the South African government at the same Rand Show that the failed assassination attempt took place on Hendrik Verwoerd at the time. And that was bought by the South African government, the Department of Information, as it became. And the last time that work was seen was in June 1975 at the Teferi Museum in Belgium. And subsequently, it's never been seen again. So somewhere in some government embassy overseas or, some office here, there's that work, as is, and the second one is a work called Music and Dance, where we didn't actually get to find it, although it's somewhere, and perhaps this catalogue will flush it out, or it will stimulate some individual to say, well, I've seen this before, or, it's on the desk of the ambassador in London or Vienna or somewhere. To really bring that to the fore, because these belong to the South African nation, and it would be phenomenal to see these two works. Other than that, I think when you go through the catalogue raisonné, you'll see that I think there are only 3 works that we have no idea what they look for, or what they look like. And those are things that, you at some point you have to say, okay, are we going to delay the publication of the book another year, 2 years, while we track down, a few leads that we have to find these. But we found works, all very difficult in the beginning, but we found works in Vancouver that had been bought, in the 1960s. You're dealing with granddaughters, married, maiden names changed. Those were big difficulties at the time, but they were more, they're difficulties when you have an invoice with a number and a name, but at the end of the day, they become fantastic challenges that you're chasing down.
I just want something. If I can just add something just important with Praying Woman, you'll see right next to the very large work, Praying Woman 2. And there was, for example, just going back to the point about sort of urban legend and anecdotal information, a lot of the stuff written about the work was that the large version you'll see outside was actually the big version that had been bought by the South African government. And it wasn't, and it isn't. But for a long time in the literature, that's what's quoted as being the large version that was made from the maquette. So that's really interesting to look at. One other comment I'd like to make is just, you've got this challenge when you're looking at bronzes and then perhaps not numbered, and they may not be signed, or they may be signed and not numbered, and trying to determine authenticity is very difficult unless you have real source documentation on who bought them and invoices and so on. And there are 2 very modern things in the book. At the back of the book, you'll see there's some QR codes which take you, if you aim your phone at it, it'll take you to a website where you can listen to interviews with Egon Gunther, Edouard de Villa, Linda Goodman, wonderful interview with an American academic, David Driscoll, this 1962 film that you saw earlier, and also the Camden Film Club. But also in the book, there's some remarkable high precision engineering scans that fortuitously I knew Ari, Egon's son-in-law, who's in this business, and his business, RGC Engineering, was able to conduct these high-level precision engineering scans, which are included in the book, to prove that in fact there were casts made which were smaller than the original casts. And urban legend has it that, or the standard practice in the business is that if you make a copy from a bronze, you lose about 2% of the height and the volume of the bronze, because you have to make a mold from the bronze and then recast it. And the scans have proven that to be completely correct.
We speak a lot about the books, and Kate mentioned the production and the detail going into that. And tonight we're very fortunate to have the designer and the layout artist in our midst, Kevin Shinton, all the way from Singapore, and Danelle van Jaarsveld in front of us. Kevin, tell us about what went into the design of the book and the making of the book.
Thank you, Madam. Good evening. Catalogue raisonné is, from a book designer's point of view, it's the holy grail of design. And I've been designing books for almost 40 years, and I've designed everything from novels through to complicated legal textbooks and economics books, and for the last 20 odd years, every form of art book, catalogues, artist monographs, exhibition catalogues, but I've never been fortunate enough to do a catalogue raisonné, because as Gavin said, they're very few and far between, and not only in South Africa, but also internationally. So when I had a phone call about this time last year from Gavin, asking me if I consider doing designing his book, I was very excited. And that was the beginning, and it turned out to be an incredibly complicated and very challenging project. Do we have? Yeah, let's see what we've got.
One moment.
You control that. You'll see.
Just give us a moment.
Oh, right, okay. So it's 150 plus 1,000 words, it's 1,128 photographs. And these photographs all came from different sources, different photographers, different ages and generations spanning 50 or 60 years. And the problem with a book like this is you've got to get a consistency so that there's an evenness of design. And that was the first major decision to make. How do we treat these photographs? Because lots of them had different backgrounds. Some were shot on black, some on white, color, in houses and gardens. And we decided that they would all be cut out and put onto an electronic background. And that in itself was a monumental undertaking. Fortunately, I have the service is a very good image retouching photographer, Liz Witter, who, without her contribution, the thing wouldn't look as good as it does.
This is on Gavin's website.
Ah, right. Okay, as you can see, it's just from the contents page, there's a hell of a lot of different sections, and the typography on this book. Okay, you can hold it there. There are two main sections. There's one which is the story and the history in general, and then there's the actual catalogue raisonné. So they form two very distinct parts. The first section runs over 2 columns and lots of reasonable sized photographs. But as you can see, we're... What's going on here? Okay, stop. Right, this is the catalogue raisonné section. And we've got lots of different types of information that need to be made clear. You know, you've got dates, mediums, and whatever. And when it was just in black, the text was very complicated, difficult to distinguish. So we made the decision to introduce red as a 6th color. And that actually helped the design. It made it very easy to navigate around the information on the page. And technically, this book is very extravagant. The photographs are printed in traditional 4-color, but then we've run red as a spot color, and also the black and white photographs that you see are actually 2 colors. There's a black and gray in there, it's called a duotone. So production-wise, it's very expensive, and Strauss are very generous with their money and were able to indulge me in that respect. But I think the end result as a consequence of that is so much better for that having that extra option, technical option. We can go forward a bit further. I'm not sure what selection we have here. You see these black and whites. Go back one. You see the black and white photographs, these are duotone, and because of that, they get a much more rich, continuous tone. It's almost like looking at an actual photographic print, because you've got an additional gray, so the spectrum of black is very gentle. You don't get any of the jaggedness that you do if you're printing it in black. Okay, let's see what else we've got. Okay, and this is basically how it works. It's a 3-column grid, because the text is quite compact, much smaller, so that because one's referencing this occasionally, it's not a continuous read. Unlike the front of the book, which you read like a conventional novel, this you would dip into and out of, so it doesn't have to be that much bigger. And here you see the treatment we've done of the main photographs for each section. They were deep edged and then put against a slightly gradated neutral grey background, which gave the whole book a uniformity and held it together. Okay. Yeah, and then things, subsidiary photographs like that. And then we were very fortunate that Ezrom's photographs add a highlight to the, and make this book really, really special. These beautiful pictures, an occasional double-page spread of the very good, magnificent ones. This picture, hold it, get back. Back. Stop. This picture in particular, the way it fits on the page, the way it's been photographed, it's got so much power in it. It's almost like pushing out of the page. We cropped it in very tight so that it gets that feeling like it's trying to burst out of the book and the page. So we're really lucky having some great photographs in here. Okay. Then there was the back. One of the appendices is a list of all the exhibitions, which is also run on a 3-column grid with the odd photographs, and then the appendices, which show archival material, add-ons, bills of sale, invoices, various letters. So you've got a whole different, carry on. Oh, and then we have a visual index, so that you can look it up by the name of the picture, name of the sculpture. You get a visual reference and it gives you the SK number and flip into the book. So those are the various elements which were all of a design challenge and a very enjoyable one as well. From my point of view, I haven't enjoyed working on a book for a long time, like I did on this one. So thank you, Gavin, finally.
I'm going to put the two of you on the spot, and you have to tell me your favorite Kumalos and your favorite Legaes.
So when Wilhelm asked this question, it's really a difficult one. I could have chosen, I don't know, when you walk around the exhibition, and I think, are we going to do the challenge where we're going to ask people at the exhibition to nominate their favorite Kumalo and Legae? Because it really is amazing. You look at these and there's so much diversity that, and it's not just about being big. Some of the small ones are absolutely monumental and they're only 9 inches or 6 inches tall. And then you've got some that are huge, that when you walk around, they're 1.6 meters high. So coming up with 3 sculptures, and they're not necessarily, I own 2 of those, I don't own the third one. And we're sort of, which are the ones that from a sculpture point of view, I really believe show the most amazing creativity and workmanship. So I'll start with the first one, which is called Large Seated Women. It's outside. And if you look at the composition, the balance, the tension, the arms, the legs, the base is designed by Ezrom Legae. And if you see that work on any other base, it's a fraction of what it is as a complete sculpture. So you've got this amazing combination of talents. You've got these artists designing these works, a foundry casting them, then you've got Ezrom Legae when they come back from the foundry, finishing them, patinating them, polishing them, and making the bases for them. So it was a left hand, right hand combination because you needed both and the foundry to all be working in combination. But if you just look at the balance of that, the patination, the texture, the base, I can't imagine that sculpture on any other base other than that. So it's just a spectacular, I've been lucky to live in the United Kingdom, Hong Kong, Australia, America, Canada. I can't think of much sculpture in the rest of the world which is as good as this. So that's one of my other 3 favorites. It's called The Listener. It's outside. I was very lucky to have one, and Ezrom Legae has one. And it's just the most spectacular sculpture, just again, it's big. Just the face, it could only be African, but it's this wonderful, joyful sculpture, the Listener. And when Kevin chose to put it as the final photographs in the book, he's only got the head section with the hands by the ears. And I said to Kevin, why did you choose that book? And he said, waiting for the applause. But you need to have a really good look there, but there are so many that are good out there. It's very hard to choose 3. The third one, I wish I did own that one, is just fabulous. And I won't go into the graphic details about the title, why it's called 2 Bulls, but I'm sure when you go and look at it, you can use your imagination. It's a large sculpture. It's done at the sort of the end of the period with Ezrom Legae. He unfortunately only cast 2 of them. And it's the most spectacular sculpture when you look at the man and the bull. And then you'll also, when you look at these things, you just, the variety of influences on that and the power of it. I can't think of, there's no Australian sculptor that I can think of that would come close to that in terms of ability as a sculptor. Sorry, I've got some Legaes to do. Legae is a little bit easier, there are fewer of them, but again, you build favorites out of just living with them and knowing them. So my favorite is the Embrace. It's here. It's the most fabulous sculpture. It doesn't matter which side you stand on it. It's interesting all the way around, 360 degrees. So its other title is The Return of the Prodigal Son, and it's 2 figures embracing. and just the workmanship on it, the design, just the variety of angles that are in it is just the most amazing sculpture. And I'm very fortunate to have one, and I'll say it's probably the finest sculpture I've got. The Young Man is probably Legae's iconic work. Really beautiful piece. Again, a little bit of a story. The original title was The Prisoner. If you go behind it, you'll see that the hands are tied behind its back. But for correctness reasons, Egon couldn't call it The Prisoner, so it was retitled The Young Man. But again, a really beautiful, evocative sculpture, beautifully finished again, fabulous patina, just a wonderful, wonderful work. And then the one that you saw earlier on is the full page by Legae called Reclining Figure 1. And just the angles that he's managed to get and the way he's positioned the sculpture is just outstanding. And if you go onto the website and use your QR code or just look up the website, I've got these wonderful interviews with Egon and Eduardo and Linda, and just the sort of the insights into what these sculptors were doing at the time and how they were making these and how they were interacting with Egon on them was really quite spectacular.
Charles, it's your turn.
Well, again, it's a sort of a between Gavin and I, we had too much overlap, but large seated woman, that's the very first sculpture I acquired. I mean, you can look at the robustness of it. In fact, Sydney did, I think, about 7 versions of the large seated woman and very strong African theme with the thick legs, the supplicant hands. The second one is called Mandala 1.
Sorry.
So that's Mandala 1, and that won a bronze prize in, it was made in 1966, and it won a prize in, what was it, 1967? 66. And I mean, you can look at that. It's phenomenal. There's another version of it in the same space where Sydney reworked it, and it becomes more cubist. But I mean, phenomenal gravitas of an old man, an Induna, the wisdom. When you look at it from the back and the side, you have these hunched shoulders, and then this position that, although he is a much older man and his legs are stronger, he has this huge wisdom, and the recognition in 1966 that Sydney got for this work. The third one, that's a Girl with Bird. You'll see it down here. I think only 2 were ever cast. Phenomenal sculpture. You look at it from all angles, and of course the bird on the hands is arguably as often in the South African literature as the Impundulu bird. And again, a magnificent work, and one would have hoped that more were cast, and I think that's something you're going to see a lot of in the book, where you think, okay, there was an edition of 10. One's in South African National Gallery. I'll wait for another one to come up. They honor other ones. And that's what makes Kumalo and the 5 sculptures particularly collectible out there, is the fact that very few were cast. Again, like Gavin, Embrace is phenomenal. It's one, I'll just go on to the next one. Oh no, well, Gavin's spoken about Embrace, but I think there we go. So Embrace won Ezrom Legae his first prize, which was in July 1967, when the Natal Society of Arts was very prominent, and he exhibited there. The next one is called Head of a Wise Man. So Head of a Wise Man, and you can see clearly the wise man. What you're not seeing in the photograph, but you'll see in the book, in this and in almost all of the 7 other heads that Ezrom Legae did, are these, as they were described by Dirk Meerkotte in the exhibition in, I think, 1966, neck vertebras. So the neck vertebrae, which are very prominent down the back of many of these heads, that Ezrom crafted. And the other one that I selected is just called Small Head. You'll see it exhibited, but I mean, look at these angles. It's phenomenal. You know, you look at a sculpture like that and you say, you know, this is world class beyond, you know, how come, and that was one of the things that also led me into this engagement with Gavin. And in general, was how is it possible that you have artists like Sydney Kumalo and Ezrom Legae, that if I had to ask you all in the audience who's heard of them, and you spread that question further out there, very few people know who they are. And this deserves international recognition, these sculptures. And as Gavin said, you know, Wilhelm said to us, pick 3. You know, it's like, come on, Wilhelm, give us 20. You know, it's difficult to, and they are phenomenal works. You know, and I think as South Africans, you can be incredibly proud of this heritage that you have. And to add to that is you'll read in the book the forwards by Kgalema Motlanthe, the former president of South Africa. And shout out to Lucy De Stephanus if she's here, because, you know, through her contacts I managed to reach her. Hello, Lucy. You know, she managed to put me in touch with the right people that eventually opened the door. And he jumped at the opportunity. You know, in his appreciation of the art world, a country or a civilization or a nation's legacy to its people will be its art and its culture, and of course the human capital. Because when you go visiting Prague, or you go to Moscow, or you go to Brasilia, people, tourists, they go to see the art, they go to see, other than the drinking and eating and everything else, art museums, sculpture, the cultural heritage is very high on the list.
Talk a little bit about why you should buy a copy of the book. One sentence. No, three sentences. So, first of all, just to repeat something that was said earlier, this book has been done on a not-for-profit basis. So Charles and I aren't getting any royalties out of the book. We've worked for years on the book for no remuneration. All the photography costs have been covered largely by Charles, myself. Fabulous editor of the book who's here, Cynthia Kemp, and where's she sitting? They're hiding away, just fabulous editing. And we think this is a really important book on South African art. We think it's an important book to buy. And it's also important that Strauss gets rewarded for their costs of the design, the layout, and the printing of this book. And honestly, I've shown people in Australia the book, the size, the quality of the paper, the photographs, and they all say it's so cheap. So please buy them, because it's a really important contribution to South African art.
And again, I know they were a bit late in arriving, but to Brian and Muzi Kumalo and his sister Tandi Kumalo, we honor your father's legacy. It's absolutely phenomenal. Unfortunately, we couldn't locate the members of the Legae family. Hopefully, during the course of the next few months we will. But really, to both Ezrom Legae and to Sydney Kumalo, your contribution to the art history, the cultural heritage of South Africa, as much as it has been understated and little known, we hope that book is going to put you, both of them, very high up in the appreciation of South Africans in the years to come.
You're here.
And once again, a great congratulations to both of you. I'm sure many of you have questions, and I invite you to speak to them out there among the wonderful sculptures. So thank you very much.